We are in the middle of a series that we've titled God's Everyday Heroes and Champions. And so far we've looked at characters from the Bible such as Barnabas, that was 2 weeks ago. We looked at Tortoise as our hero, the tortoise in the tortoise and hare story. We looked at, who else did we look at? Who else did we look at? Yeah, I said that already. Anybody else? Did we look at Jesus? Oh, we did. Yeah, okay, we did. We made reference to Jesus. We looked at 2 Muslim converts last week, if you remember, who gave their lives to the Lord under very difficult circumstances. We had a guest speaker, a mission speaker by the name of Walt, who works in a country in South Asia. And he was telling us about 2 converts that came to Christ and the persecution they went through in their decision to hand their lives over to God, to live for God, but also in continuing their faith under enormous challenges and circumstances. So we looked at them as God's everyday heroes and champions. We also looked at Walt himself. Now, he wouldn't say that he's a hero, but he's definitely a hero to me. At a very young age, he received a call from the Lord to be involved in mission work, and he has stuck to it for over 30 years. That's longevity for you. And I'm sure in the course of those 30 years, he faced challenges. He would have had moments where he felt like giving up, that things weren't working out for him. But together with his wife and children, they stuck the course. They stayed the course. We define also some of the characteristics. We looked at some of the characteristics of God's everyday heroes and champions, such as they finish well, they have integrity, they're encouragers, they persevere through times of difficulties. This morning we're going to look at Caleb. Most of us hear about Joshua. There's a book named after him, but Caleb did not have such an honor. But he is very much a hero like Joshua. He was one of the 2 spies like Joshua who believed that God can do it. With God, they can overcome all obstacles. So we're going to look at him this morning. Sadly, but inevitably, heartaches, mistakes, failures, hardships, all part and parcel of life. It is virtually impossible to go through life unaffected by events that will disappoint, that will discourage us, that will hurt us, that will devastate us, that will empty us of strength and morale to continue. It could be that our relationships, our dreams and aspirations that we've nurtured, carefully nurtured, and heavily invested into over the years that have not worked out the way we had expected or hoped. Worse still, they have gone pear-shaped. And these life setbacks impact us and pain us differently. Some of these setbacks are self-caused. Some are caused by events beyond our control and understanding, while others are caused by the actions of others. Caleb encountered a major setback and disappointment in his life. And he's one of the rare ones who could with merit and justification say, it wasn't my fault. We like to blame people when things don't go well with us without merit and justification most of the time. But Caleb, I would have to say, it wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault that he experienced a major disappointment in his life, and he had to live with it for 40 years. It all started when, as a slave, living and working in torrid and unjust conditions in Egypt, Moses, the leader, planted a dream, a hope in his heart that one day in the not too distant future, he, his family, and his people would be delivered from a life of slavery in the land of slaves to a life of abundance, the land of the free and home of the brave. He could envision the promised land in his mind. It would be spacious. It would be bountiful. It would be overflowing with milk and honey. He could envision what their new life would look like. They would build their own home, their very first home that they could call home. They would plant their own crops, that would raise their own livestock of cattle and sheep. They would be able to enjoy and eat the fruits of their labor. The abuse, the torture, the humiliation that he and his wife had been enduring would no longer be the fate of their precious children. What a dream to look forward to. Dared he hope against all hope that this deliverance could be possible from one of the most powerful superpower at the time? Caleb didn't have to wait long for his answer. In a spectacular display of power, God humbled Pharaoh and brought him to his knees. Pharaoh finally yielded to God's demands to free his people, his Israelites, from Egypt. Caleb would never forget that day when he and his family, together with hundreds of thousands of his kinsmen, left Egypt as free men and free women. With God going ahead of them, he marched into his unknown future with confidence and hope, because God was at the helm. Over a year later, God, through the leadership of Moses, had miraculously brought them to the edge of the promised land after a long and difficult journey from Egypt. It was finally time to enter into the promised land. It would only be a matter of time before his dream would become a living reality. Just put yourself in that situation. You're about to see your dream that you've been dreaming about for 40 years. For a long time, coming to pass. The story is found in Numbers 13 and 14. The Lord told Moses, before they could enter, to send a reconnaissance team of 12 men to explore the land. And one of the men was Caleb, a leader of the tribe of Judah. Caleb was deliriously excited by what he saw. The land was way more beautiful and way more prosperous than he could ever dream or imagine. In the valley of Eshcol, they had to cut down a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes that was so large, it took two of them to carry it on a pole between them. He could not wait to tell Moses. He could not wait to tell his family and his children, and he could not wait to tell the rest of the Israelite community what he had seen. After exploring the land for 40 days, the 12 men returned to the Israelite camp to give a report to Moses and the rest of the community. And this is what the 10 men said. "We went into the land to which you sent us, Moses, and it does overflow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. Worse yet, we even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak." Caleb and Joshua could see fear building up in the eyes of the community as they heard the report. Caleb quickly counted the 10 and said, "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it." Now his confidence and his optimism wasn't based on his willfulness to get into the promised land, nor was it based on his arrogance. Caleb remembered how the Lord had provided for Israel since they left Egypt in miraculous ways. He had seen the Lord part at the Red Sea. He had seen the Lord provided water from a rock. He had seen God fed them, hundreds of thousands of them, with manna from the sky and quails from the sky. So Caleb wasn't in denial about the giants at all, but rather he was challenging the 10. about their debilitating fear that was not only affecting them, but that was spreading it amongst the people. The debilitating fear that was skewing reality, that was skewing and putting and casting a shadow on God's character and God's abilities. That's what he was challenging. That's what he was confronting them about. See, debilitating fear occurs when we leave God out of our picture. When we leave God out of our reality, whatever that is. When we leave God out of our lives, that's when debilitating fear begins to encroach upon us. True faith, on the other hand, does not ignore nor exaggerate reality. True faith stares at reality in the face and sees reality for what it is. If it is bleak, true faith says it is bleak. If there are giants in the land, true faith says there are giants in the land. Caleb never excluded the presence of giants in his report. The difference between him and Joshua and the rest of the 10 was this. They included God in their report. They included God in their picture. The faith in him said, the giants are big, but God is bigger. True faith said, the giants are strong, but God is stronger. The 10 measured the giants against their own strength, but Caleb measured the giants against God's strength. The 10 trembled, but Caleb stood firm on God's character and his abilities. The majority saw big giants and a small God, but Caleb saw a big God and small giants. More importantly, Caleb knew the promised land was God's idea in the first place. Caleb was saying to the people, if it is God's will, then God will ensure that we will succeed in our mission. Yes, there are obstacles. Yes, expect hindrances. Yes, expect wrestling. Expect things to be not going well all the time. But God is able to deliver us from every obstacle that comes our way. God has said that the land is ours, and we're not going to disobey him no matter what the challenges are, no matter what the obstacles are. But the 10 vehemently disagreed. Fear ruled them, and the Bible says that they began to spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land. In other words, they began to spread lies about what they had seen, and their purpose was because they wanted to sway the people against going into the land, and in due process disobey God yet again. Sadly, the 10 succeeded in swaying the rest of the community to disobey God. Moses, Aaron, Joshua, and Caleb all pleaded with them to change their minds, to not rebel against God. They failed, unfortunately. And we pick up the story in Numbers chapter 14, verses 10 to 12. You don't have to turn to it. It's written up there for you. But the whole assembly talked about stoning them. Think about that. Here's Moses. They've never seen such miracles ever performed by men, and they're now so mad at Moses about going into the promised land. So unwilling they were about going into the promised land. So willful and resistant to God's will that they're willing to kill Moses and Aaron and Joshua and Caleb, all the leaders. Then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of the meeting to all the Israelites. The Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me in spite of all the signs I have performed among them? I will strike them with a plague and destroy them. Moses prayed for his people again. Moses must have the flattest nose on planet Earth because he was always falling down on his face all of the time for his people. God, have mercy upon my people, forgive them. And God heard his prayer and extended mercy to them and forgave them. But he adds in number 14, verse 28, and these are terrifying words. As surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very thing that I've heard you say. You want to go back to the wilderness? You can have it. That's what's going to happen to you. You can go back into the wilderness where your bodies will fall. Every one of you, 20 years old or more, who was counted in the census, who has grumbled against me, not one of you will enter the land I swore with uplifted hand to make your home, except Caleb and Joshua. As for your children that you said would be taken as plunder, I will bring them in to enjoy the land that you have rejected. But your bodies will fall in the wilderness until the last of your bodies lies in the wilderness. For 40 years, one for each of the 40 days you explored the land. You will suffer for your sins and know what it is like to have me against you. I, the Lord, have spoken, and I will surely do these things to this whole wicked community, which is banded together against me. They will meet their end in this wilderness. Here they will die. It's a terrifying thing to have the Lord be against us. With that, Caleb's dreams went up in flames through no fault of his. Put yourself now in the shoes of Caleb. You wanted to go. Caleb wanted to go. Caleb believed with all of his heart it was possible. It was time to enter into the promised land. But that was God's destiny for them. How could they not believe that God was able in the light of all the miracles he's performed? He wanted to go, but he was outvoted by the 10. The rest of the community took sides. It was not with the side of Joshua and Caleb, it was with the side of the other 10 spies. So through no fault of his dreams were squashed. He, together with the rest, would have to spend 40 years in the wilderness. Put yourself in his shoes. What would that do to you as a person? The notion of spending 40 years in the desert. Never mind the dream that God has put on your heart. What do you do when your dreams and hopes of a good and peaceful life are shattered? How do you rebound and get back up when everything within you tells you that you have every right and reason to give up, to quit, to throw the towel in, and stop believing in God altogether? All of us have a capacity to get bitter and twisted by life's setbacks. Life's setbacks, such as failures and disappointments, have a way of grinding us down and wearing us out. Even the best of us can end up bitter, cynical, and twisted by life's circumstance. Through self-talk, we imagine what life could have been with more money, for instance. Through self-talk, we could imagine what life would have been if we were married or not married. Through self-talk, we can imagine what life could be if we had a job or didn't have a job. This kind of thinking only serves to compound our disappointments, inflicting more misery upon ourselves as the discrepancies between what life is and what life could have been are accentuated. Caleb didn't focus on his life setbacks and disappointments for too long. He is made of different stuff. This is how God described Caleb in Numbers 14:24. I love these words. Caleb, my servant, has a different spirit. He follows me wholeheartedly. Caleb, my servant, is made of different stuff in that he follows me wholeheartedly. Caleb just carried on with life and played the hand he was dealt with. He made do with the circumstance he found himself in. He was not going to focus on blaming the 10 for his lot in life. He was not going to long for what he didn't have. Instead, he focused on what he did have. His family, his wife, his children, his God. He was going to follow God wholeheartedly. He was going to be faithful to God and remain loyal to God's character through thick and thin, no matter the circumstance. He was going to put his trust wholly in God's goodness and God's abilities. He was going to give all to God. 40 years later, Caleb is now 85 years old. And we find Caleb is just as wholehearted and as enthusiastic about God and his promises as he was when he was 40 years old. Moses by now had died and passed on. The leadership had been handed over to Joshua. And together with a new generation of Israelites, they entered into the promised land, taking bits and pieces. Caleb has still not settled into his dream land. And now in this moment, he sees this land that he believes God has promised him. And he says this to Joshua in Joshua chapter 14, verse 10. I love it. Now then, just as the Lord has promised, 40 years later, how long are we prepared to wait for God's promise? 40 years later, just as the Lord has promised, Josh. He has kept me alive for 45 years since the time he said this to Moses. So here I am today, 85 years old. I'm still as strong today. Moses sent me out. Might be a little bit of exaggeration there. I'm still as strong today as I was. I'm just as vigorous today as I was out to battle as I was then. Just give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself heard then that the Anakites were there. So the giants. That's where I want to go and fight. I mean, 85 years old, you think that he'd choose the easiest challenge, right? The most simple challenge. The easiest task. Why fight a giant when you can fight a wimp, right? But he says, no, I want to fight a giant. I want to deliberately go to that place because I remember the giants were there. And when I was 40 years old, I was looking forward to that battle. And 40 years later, I haven't changed my mind. I still want to fight. I'm still as rigorous as ever. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out just as he said. Caleb had no retirement plans. He didn't believe in it. Caleb did not believe in giving up. Caleb did not believe in hosting pity parties. He never had one. He was certainly not at this time about to call and organize a pity party. No. He had no time for that. God had spoken to him, and that word has yet to be fulfilled, and now is the time, and he was looking forward to seeing God at work through him and in him as an 85-year-old man. My servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly. Caleb decided a long time ago that he was going to go all the way with God. That he was going to give it all to God. And that he was going to finish the race marked out for him, even if he has to limp across the finishing line. I'd like you to watch this video clip now. Because we don't have sound, like I said, the impact is lost, but I hope the message still gets to you. It is about a runner, a British runner, who was competing in the 400-meter race back in the Barcelona Olympic Games in 1992. Maybe some of you have seen this. If you haven't, go home and see it. Because in the background is a song by Josh Groban. Can we put up the next slide? The next one. When I think of that scene, this is what comes to my mind. The eyes of the Lord searcheth the whole earth. And he's looking. He's looking to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to Him. Because life is hard. God knows that. Life is tough. It gets really discouraging at times. God knows that. But when He sees us going, God, I'm going to continue the race. I'm going to finish the race. It won't be how I envisioned it. It won't be how I expected it. It won't be as fast as how I wished it'd be. But I'm determined to finish the race. And God bursts through. The angels move out of the way. And He jumps out of His seat and says, I've got to run with you. He looks, He searches the whole earth in order to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to Him. Brothers and sisters, we can allow life's mistakes, hardships, and failures suck the life out of us, render us bitter and twisted and cause us to quit. Or we can allow God, through disappointments of life, inject life back into us, render us better, heal as best as healing can possibly be, and succeed. Ultimately, how we deal with our setbacks, mistakes, and failures will greatly influence our outcomes and what they will be, and determine if we are one of God's everyday heroes and champions. God is calling us, is challenging us to be like Caleb, to follow Him with all of our hearts, all of our days. Not to follow Him all of our hearts and part of our days, and not to follow Him with part of our hearts all of our days, but may it be said of us, we can have the last slide, may it be said of us at the end of our days, here is a person who followed the Lord with all of his heart for all of his days. Amen.